Hello, my name is Steve Haynes. I'm a former student at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. I spent 10 years working in the music industry in different areas, from orchestral to recording to TV stuff, working in theatre, education, and last year gave all that up to be London Regional Official at the Musicians Union. The MU represents over 30,000 musicians working in all different aspects of the music industry, and one of those members is joining me now, James Burke. James is also a former student at the Guildhall, now a professor there as well, and he's clarinetist in the BBC Symphony Orchestra and also the Academy of St Martin in the Fields. So, James, why don't you start by telling us about a week in the life of James Burke?
It can be pretty busy, I guess. It's Maida Vale, usually, is where the BBC Symphony Orchestra rehearse. Barbican concert then. Teaching at Guildhall, and doing some freelance work, and I do the Academy of St Martin in the Fields, so that's usually long tours or recording sessions, but yeah, tours anywhere from a week to 3 weeks, something like that, so it's very varied.
Busy boy, doing lots of different things. And I guess the beauty of it for you is that you've got the variety there as well.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you know, that's the best thing about what I do, I think, is that it's always different. There isn't a typical week, you know, per se, even though, you know, it's within a structure, you know. And having all the variety does make it exciting, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So when you're working in the BBC or when you're at the Academy of St Martin's, presumably you go off and do other freelance work as well. How do you know what you're going to get paid?
Well, I guess at the BBC, I've got the salary, so I know roughly what's coming in every month from that. And then when you go somewhere else, yeah, I guess, you know, you're reliant on what the MU has negotiated on behalf of that orchestra, really. And I know you can check online for things like that.
Great. And when did you join the MU then?
So I joined straight after I graduated, when I became a member of South Bank Symphonia for that year, straight after I graduated. And yeah, I think all of us did. There was somebody that came and gave a talk and suggested that we all become members, and I think we all decided it was a good idea. So from my point of view, I look at the MU and see it as this sort of big, massive organisation that maybe I don't quite understand how it all works. So maybe could you tell us just how it works?
Really? I mean, I guess using myself as an example is quite useful, because I used to be on one side of the organisation, if you like, and now I'm on the kind of the other side of it. So in essence, the MU is made up of members like yourself who get elected onto the various different committees, whether that's, you know, the theatre section committee, or it's the freelance orchestral committee, or a regional committee, London Regional Committee, for example. And all those committees are made up of working musicians who provide the policy, in essence, for the direction that we go in. At the top of the organisation, there's the executive committee. And then the side that I'm on now is I'm employed by the union, so I'm not a musician anymore, I don't play anymore. But yeah, so I guess I've kind of gone from being a politician to being a civil servant, if that makes sense. Yeah. But how would you say that the Musicians Union, what's your perception of the way that the Musicians Union can help people when they're, you know, in a freelance arena, and where things, you don't have that safety net and things can go wrong?
For me, when I was freelancing, I sort of didn't even realise I was using the MU, I guess, when I was using the MU. Just being, when I was a member, having that safety net of going, well, things have got to be done properly. When somebody employs you to do something and you're not quite sure if it's what you should be doing, if that's what you should be signing, or, oh, I didn't realise this was going to be recorded, or you've got that safety net of advice, and yeah, it was, you know, somebody you can ask and just ring up or chat to and go, is this all right? Is this meant to be happening? Is this, or should I be saying, no, actually, we're only being paid to do this or that? I guess there was that, and yeah, before when I was freelancing, I was doing other things on the side, so setting up the odd concert on my own. So I was fixing a few players, and it's important to know what people expect to be paid. and I was doing some arranging, very little bits, you know, but you just don't have any idea what you should be charging, what people expect, you know, what service they expect for that money. So you've got all this sort of advice really online and with people who have been members a lot longer than I have, or sort of representatives and things like that of the MU who just have all the answers like that, and well, most of the time.
And what would you say starting out for people who would say coming out of music college and starting out in this, you know, perhaps having to build up a portfolio career like you talked about earlier, what would you say are the kind of the main pitfalls when the MU can help? What would you say are the issues that crop up?
I guess when you're first starting, the thing on your mind a lot of the time is money. How do I make a living from this?
You know, we're very aware that there's kind of a transitional period, isn't there? From, you know, you don't just, well, not many people walk out of music college into a full-time job.
Yeah.
And certainly we get a lot of calls here at the MU from people where it has gone wrong. So, you know, something's gone wrong. For example, I've did this gig the other day and I haven't been paid for it. Yeah. I've signed up to do this gig and it's been cancelled. What do I do? Yeah. I'm doing some teaching and something's gone wrong in the school. Yeah. What do I do about that? You know, and I think that's the kind of things that we don't always know about when we're starting out in the business. Yeah. I think the other side of it is exactly what you say, is perhaps established concert promoters or big acts trying to find musicians who will undercut rates, and the knock-on effect that has for future generations. And I think the difficulty for us sometimes is getting that message across to people and saying, well, you know, somebody's selling you this gig on exposure, like you say, and like you say, it doesn't pay the bills, does it? And I think it's difficult when you're trying to find that balance of coming out of college and saying, well, I need to build up that portfolio career, but how do I do that without undercutting, you know, rates? So what's your awareness of the legal rights that you have in the various different scenarios that you work in, and how does that compare to what you used to know, if you like?
It's a lot more than I used to know, but I wouldn't say I know that much offhand really about sort of, I know my rights in terms of orchestral things really, but if I'm asked to do something outside of that, it would be way more limited, and that's when I'd be Googling, phoning, asking, you know, is this right? You know, before I signed anything. Or
it's interesting because you have quite an interesting juxtaposition there, really, don't you, between an employed position at the BBC and essentially a self-employed position at the Academy of St Martin's. Yeah. So is that something that you're aware of when you go into those organisations, or is it just feel the same?
It was when I was freelancing as a guest in an orchestra. Although the Academy of St Martin's, it is a freelance orchestra, I guess I sort of feel like that I'm a member of that still. But when, it is different. It is different.
It's interesting from an employment law perspective as well, because, you know, you could have, even in the BBC, you know, you could have yourself as an employee, and the person you're sitting next to could be self-employed or a worker. So, and all those different categories of employment carry different employment rights. Yeah. So I don't think it's something that we kind of think of as musicians. When you sit down in an orchestra and you think, well, we're all in this together, we're all one orchestra for today. Yeah. But actually, there's nothing to stop people turning round to someone who's self-employed and saying, actually, we don't want to see you again.
Yeah, I mean, that is the precarious nature of freelance work, I guess, is that, you know, if you're having a bad day or even somebody else is having a bad day, but they can be in a position to say, actually, that's that, and there's not really much you can do about it.
So what advice would you give to students leaving college?
I guess you're always going to have work that comes in that you do want to build up your portfolio, you do want to get things on your CV, and that's really important, definitely, and a good experience for yourself as a performer. But always make sure that you're doing it for that reason, I guess, and not that somebody's asking you to do something and saying, oh, this will be really good for you, and in the back of your head, really, it's not really going to be that good for me.
Don't be exploited.
Don't be exploited. Yeah. So, Steve, what are the ways that the MU can help?
So we get phone calls, as you can imagine, about all different kinds of things, whether that's someone who's not been paid for a gig, someone who's had a gig cancelled, someone who's been offered a contract and they don't know whether to sign it, someone who's having a problem with their teaching, perhaps they've been said to them, don't come back in September. These are all the kinds of things that we get on a kind of a daily basis. What I'd say is, in terms of contracts, I think it's really important to make sure you've got something in writing. We tend to think of contracts, don't we, as these massive documents, but in essence, a contract just has to be an offer, an acceptance, something of value has to change hands, and there has to be an intent into entering into legal relationship. So it doesn't have to be a massive document, and you can get it in writing on email as long as there's a paper trail. But what I would say is definitely get it in writing, because oral agreements are very, very difficult to enforce. Negotiating, we do that on a daily basis here, and I could talk to you about negotiation all day, but then I'd have to kill you because I don't necessarily like giving away the tactics and the way that we do stuff. But obviously, as a member, you could call up and say, I've been offered this fee, how do I get it higher? And we might be able to look at different levers that you can use to say, how about this and how about that? But in essence, what I would say about negotiating is that people aren't necessarily against you, they're just for themselves. Right. So if you can present something to the other side in their terms that sounds good to them, then you're kind of halfway there to getting what you want as well. I think they call it a win-win, don't they, in negotiating terms. Cancellations, gigs get cancelled, fees don't get paid, you might turn up and do a gig and then not get paid for it. We can help with that, we can offer legal advice and assistance to recover fees through a small claims court. We can have contracts checked. We have a contract advisory service, so if you've got a contract that needs checking, you can send it and a lawyer can check that for you. And in essence, we can get legal advice on lots of different areas, whether that's copyright or employment law. We can pick up the phone to lawyers if we don't know the answer ourselves, and try and give you the advice that you need. We get a lot of copyright queries, so members phoning up and saying, I've been recorded, or this recording that I did has been used for that. I think it's important to remember that copyright exists in an arrangement, it exists in the original composition, it exists in a sound recording. So if you own the copyright to something, it's your recording that you're playing on, and you haven't had those rights bought from you, then that's something we can help with as well, and make sure that people aren't getting exploited in that sense. Employment rights is another one. So are you self-employed in that context? Are you a worker? Are you an employee? Because all of those carry different levels of protection in terms of the Employment Rights Act. Knowing your rights in that situation we can help with, and offer assistance to say, perhaps you're acting in a way that you're leaving yourself a bit of a precarious situation there. Or we might be able to say, your employer's treating you really badly there, and we think you perhaps want to consider doing this. Right. Other benefits include public liability insurance. So if you were performing in a museum and you knocked an artefact off the wall, then obviously that would cover that. Instrument insurance, we've got accident cover, I'm reading them off because there are so many. Professional expenses insurance, professional indemnity insurance. Yeah, the instrument insurance is really useful. All you have to do is sign up for it. It's part of your membership. So yeah, there are lots of benefits that are kind of in the package as well.
So just to finish off, what would you say are your top 3 tips for working in the music industry?
I'd say the first one is get it in writing. Make sure that everything that you undertake, you've got some paperwork, a paper trail to back it up, email, whatever it is, get it in writing. The second one I'd say is know your rights. When you go into a situation, is there a copyright issue? Is there an employment issue? How do you protect yourself? Know your rights. And finally, I'd say join the MU.